Welcome back, crew. While July is coming to a close and with it our focus on the One Ring, we're going out with a bang. We're going to be going over today the key mechanics of playing the One Ring RPG, going over the adventuring phase, which covers for the One Ring combat, the council modes, which is kind of their social interactions, as well as the journey phase, which is key to any Lord of the Rings Middle Earth adventure. So we're going to go over all those key aspects and the mechanics and how to run those. So at the end of this video, you'll hopefully feel confident and prepared to be able to run them with your crew, and hopefully I'll feel confident and prepared to run them for tonight. Because if you're watching this today, Wednesday the 27th of July, this is the day of our actual play game. So tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to be running the Lord of the Rings, or sorry, the One Ring RPG actual play. So I'm going to be going through, it's going to be in the Strider mode, so it'll just be kind of me, myself, and I up there going through running this system and going over the mechanics as we go, and get my own little Lord of the Rings choose your own adventure on. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. So make sure to join me at Tegan J Gaming, link down in the description at twitch.com. Drop a follow if you haven't, and come hang out as we go through some cool Lord of the Rings adventures, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it goes well. This will be my first time running a solo RPG too, so first time at all, not even on stream. So I'm looking forward to it. Definitely a little nervous, but it'll be fun. So come hang out. And if that doesn't sound kind of intriguing on its own, we're going to be giving away a copy of the One Ring PDF to one lucky viewer. So come through, hang out, make sure you enter to win, and maybe you'll be able to bring a PDF of this system home and be able to run it with you and your crew. So come by. It should be a great time. But before we can do that, we need to know how to run the system. So let's get into the mechanics. So we've touched on this during our impressions video, but the One Ring is divided into two phases for kind of how the games run. What we're going to be covering today is the adventuring phase, which is kind of the primary phase where you're going to be going through, and as it says, you're going to be doing adventures. This phase that we're not going to be able to cover with this series, unfortunately, is the fellowship phase, which is more kind of after the adventure's over and kind of going over just kind of what your player does in the downtime almost. Maybe if we have another time, we'll do another video with that in there, but unfortunately, time permitting, we won't be able to get to it. Today, we're focusing on the core, the meat of the One Ring system, is how you progress through the adventuring phase. And I'd say to start with kind of the bulkiest bit, we're going to be going over how to handle combat, just to start, but then we're going to hit the council phase, which is social interactions, and then the journey phase. So, combat, to start it off, you need to know how to make an attack. So with this system, it's pretty easy. You're going to be able to roll one of your weapons. So with your weapons, you've got ranks and proficiency in them. So between the spears, axes, swords, bows, and you're going to roll a number of dice equals to those ranks. And what you're going to be shooting for is your target number, which you're always going for. But with these, you're going to actually be either target number plus the attacker or the target's parry score. So let's say you have a target number of 12 and they've got a +2 shield up there. You're going to have to beat a 14 with your weapon roll to be able to bypass their defenses and stab at them with your spear, slash at them with your sword, whatever you may be doing. Now let's say the dice favor you and you get a hit. The way you resolve that is your weapon has a damage score, and you're going to take that damage score away from their endurance, and vice versa. If you get hit, you take whatever their weapon's damage is from your endurance score, and that's kind of your HP for the system. So just wanted to go over that, just to kind of make sure that you knew how to make an attack, because that's kind of one of the biggest pieces, and I wanted to make sure that that was up front. But now we get into kind of the true combat and how they organize it. So one of the big things with how they have this system set up is that there's two phases of combat. So to start off, there's always an opening volley. So think with kind of Lord of the Rings, like Helm's Deep for a really big battle. There's always that section where the archers are shooting, people are throwing spears and axes. It's just kind of that round where everybody's using their range and kind of getting into position. So there's always that one round. Sometimes there may be multiple rounds depending on how far away they are and how difficult it is to traverse the environment. But there's always at least that one. Unless lore master discretion, there is ways. You don't have to always have that one, but generally they set the combat up with that at least one round of the opening volley being in there. So with the opening volley, a couple of things with mechanics on this side. With this, if you have a shield, you're going to take it to double your parry score with that shield, just a shield. So if you had that +2 shield, that'd bring it up to a +4 for parry during the ranged phase, as long as you're not surprised. Just because you got a shield, you can kind of heft it up in case somebody gets a lucky arrow towards you. So that's most of the range phase. The only thing I would mention on that too is with the flow of combat in this system. So it kind of goes to players first, and then the lore master, unless there's conditions that the lore master would go first. Generally, though, players first. So players would let their volley loose first, followed by the enemy's volleys, and then so on. But let's say you guys are shooting the arrows, and then everybody's charging forward, and then you get into close combat, or close quarters, I should say. So that's the second phase. And this is a little bit more of an intricate phase. So with this, there's three kind of bits that go into this, or three kind of sequential items. So once you get into the close quarters phase, the biggest thing you're going to do first is you're going to choose a stance. And there's 4 stances, 3 that technically really apply to the close quarters phase. You've got your forward stance, and this is kind of a more aggressive stance. If you're doing this, you're looking to do damage at the expense of leaving yourself more open to attack. And what that does mechanically is it gives you 1 extra die to roll on your attack roll. And also, if anybody makes an attack roll against you, they have an extra die as well, just due to the aggressive nature of your attacks, leaving you open and kind of vulnerable to return fire. So that's the first one. The next one is the open stance. This one, and also with those two, each of these stances have a different combat task you can do. These tasks take your main action, but allow you to get some extra cool features with them. So with the forward stance, you've got an intimidating foe, which allows you kind of, you roll it all and then intimidate one of the foes and kind of get some advantages on that side. But these will take your action. So we're not going to go into those stances too much just due to time, or the not the stances, but the actions you can take with them. But each of these stances have an action, and I'll mention them, but we won't go into the mechanics of them. So with that, you've got the Intimidate Foe for the forward stance. With the open stance, this is a balanced stance. So you have no pluses, no minuses. It's just kind of a straight roll for everything. And with your combat task, you've got the Rally Adventure option. Pretty cool. So that's kind of if you wanted to just kind of make sure you're balanced, you're able to defend yourself, but still get some good hits in. Now, the other end of this is if you wanted to be defensive. So this would be kind of the exact opposite of the forward. So you get a point. Enemies that attacking you would lose a point of damage. So 1 damage die, or 1 attack die, I should say. And then any attack that you make any attack that you make would lose an attack die, and then any attack against you would also lose an attack die. So basically lose all that side, just so to make it harder for people to hit you, but also harder for you to hit others as well. So makes it kind of a good one if you're just trying to hold the line there. And with that, you get the Protect Companion combat task with the stance. Now, the other stance that's available is one that has conditions assigned to it, but is usually available during the opening volley. This is the rearward stance. With this, it's more for range. You can only make ranged attacks from this, whether they be bow or throwing a spear or axe, whatever may kind of come up with that side. But you're only allowed to take the rearward stance if their total number of enemies isn't more than twice the number of adventurers in the company. So basically, you can't be engaged at this point. You can't really make sure there can't be 2-to-1 on your adventurers. You also must be, if you do take the rearward stance, there must be at least 2 other adventurers kind of in close combat scenarios. You can't have everybody kind of pull back and do the rearward stance. So this is kind of, if you have an archer in the group, this would be kind of good for the other players to kind of set up and defend them so they can keep sniping back from afar. Or they've also mentioned, too, that sometimes the environmental conditions, like if you may be in a tight pass where there's only like 2 people can pass at a time, having somebody stand back and qualify for the rearward stance. But this is just something to kind of look at the conditions, the number of foes on the field, to make sure it applies. It's not something that's going to come up every time for your players. So those are the 4 stances. So that's the first step. You choose your stance. And those stances you see kind of determine how you're going to be able to, what actions you can take, as well as how your actions will go. The next spot is engagement. So you guys are in close combat. So you will either, as the players, you get to go first, and you get to pick kind of who you want to be engaged with in melee combat. Now, one caveat to that is if the uh, enemies outnumber the players, the lore master actually gets to go first and to choose who's engaging with who. But if it's even or the players outnumber the enemies, they get to make the choice on who they want to go with. Now, there are limits to how many people can be engaged with a particular target. So, if you're going against a human sized person, it can only have three people engaged with them in them one time. Or if it's like two trolls, or it's a big troll, you can only have two people per large person, or two large people per one human-sized person. That was hard to say. Now, if you've got engaging with a large person, like a big troll, you can have up to 6 PCs engaging with that large troll. So I'll repeat that. It's a little clear on that side. So for one human-sized person, you could have up to 3 PCs engaged with them. For large people, you could have up to 2 large people engaged with one human-sized PC, and then you can have up to 6 PCs engaged with one large type PC. So easy to remember on that side. After that, so that's the engagement phase. You go into the action resolution phase, and once again, this is going to be players first, lore master second. You're going to go through, roll your attacks, roll the actions you're taking, and you can kind of resolve everything out. The also big thing with this too, within the combat phase, you've got 2 things you can do. You can take your main action, which is used for attack actions, combat tasks, etc., or you can take your secondary action, or you can do both. So you can take your main action, then your secondary action. And secondary actions, things like moving, drawing a weapon, calling out to someone, looking for a foe on the battlefield, etc. So major, minor actions on that side. And then basically you play them out. Also within the players, so players go first, but you go in stance order. So you'd go forward goes first, open goes next, defensive goes third, and if somebody has a rearward stance, they go last. Sweet. So we've covered kind of the main phases within the combat phase. The other thing we're going to touch on a little bit is just endurance and how that kind of works with that, and go over a few of the conditions. So with endurance, PCs become weary if their endurance falls below load. So you have your set load established compared to your strength number. And with your endurance, if you get attacked and it actually hits, your damage, you reduce that by the your endurance by the damage taken. And if it falls below there, you'll become weary. Nice thing though is if you do want to try to have the damage, if you get like a particularly monstrous attack against you, you can use you can have that damage once per round. But the biggest thing that has a kind of penalty with it is if you do have that damage at the next round, you have to spend your main action getting back into position because it's going to knock you back. So just something to kind of, it's a cool trade-off on that side. So basically, if you get hit really hard, is it worth losing your next turn to mitigate the damage? I always like when you get trade-offs like that. So that was pretty cool to me. So those are the big things for losing endurance. The other big thing I'll mention before we move on to conditions outside of weary is that with this, they've got special damage that can be done. So they have the heavy blow, piercing blow, as well as fend off. And the way these come into play is when if you roll an attack roll and you have at least one of the success symbols, the Gandalf symbols, you'll be able to make one of the special damages. With those two, if you have multiple ones, you can either do multiple of the same type or multiple or just different types of damages that may apply. Now, with those, heavy blow is available to all weapons, but piercing is only available to some, and fend off is only available to others too. So go through them, but kind of a cool way to represent that crit on there and be able to get some cool stuff with those success die. Especially if you ever kind of have one where you have multiples, you can really do some damage with it. So that's a little bit on the endurance side. The last 2 things we're going to touch are the other 2 conditions. We've gone over weary, and weary applies if your endurance falls below load. What weary does, though, is if you have that, when you roll your success die, and when success dies are those D6s, 1, 2, and 3 are going to count as failures for you. Or so they're going to count as 0. So if you get those 1, 2, 3, they're not going to add to your total target number. It's going to be a 0, unfortunately. So, definitely kind of a dangerous position to get into, especially as things start chipping off on your endurance. The next big one, miserable. So this is kind of more of an adventuring one. This one, kind of the shadows of Mordor, kind of trying to sap your resolve. And basically, when you get your shadow points matching or exceeding your hope, you're going to be miserable. So this will be kind of a fun one to RP. Also, with the miserable, outside of kind of the cool RP possibilities it opens up, whenever you get the Eye of Sauron on your feat die, so the D12 that you roll, it's no matter what the rest of the results are, you'll automatically fail. So I kind of think of it as losing hope. You just kind of give up on the task, no matter what kind of proclivity you may have for it before. So definitely kind of an interesting one there. And the last one you have is wounded. And basically, you can be wounded by failing protection checks, as well as some kind of an event and other checks that come up with that. And that kind of just slows you down on recovering your endurance. And if you get a second wound, you may potentially die too. So definitely something to keep aware of and kind of watch out for as you're fighting the Orcs of Mordor. So those were kind of what we wanted to hit on for the combat and in condition phase. The next big thing we're going to hit is the journey phase. So with the journey phase, this is kind of your typical Lord of the Rings Middle Earth trek through the realm as you're going closer and closer to your end goal. So think as the hobbits were going through the Shire, trying to reach Aragorn and Gandalf and Bree, or as they're trekking through Mordor, trying to reach Mount Doom. So this is just kind of that journey phase of the adventure. And it's kind of cool that they put some good rules with this. I like how they did it. So biggest thing with this is when you start off your journey, you're going to choose your roles. So there's 4 different roles that you have within a company, and each person and each role needs to be filled. So if you have so hopefully you have about 4 people. If you have less than 4 people, you can have somebody double up on a role or bring in an NPC. So with these, there's the guide, and they're going to be choosing routes, choosing when to rest, choosing how to divvy up supplies, and they're the ones that make the travel rolls, and we're going to go into what that means a little bit later. Then you have the hunter. They're the ones that hunt for food. They're going to make the hunting rolls as events come up. Then you've got the scout. They set up camp, open trails. They're going to be the ones making explore rolls. So then you've got the lookout, and they're going to be basically keeping watch, and they're going to roll awareness rolls. So now that we've gone over the roles, biggest thing, there's 3 different phases within the journey phase. So you've got the set journey path, make marching rolls, and then the ending the journey. So with the set in the journey path, this is kind of cool, and I'm a little bummed I don't have a party to do this with for my actual play, but you bring up a map of Middle Earth, and you kind of chart out where you want to, where your goal is or where your adventure is at, and then you have a hex grid. You chart out how far away it is and what path you want to take to reach it. And the players chart this out. So this is something the DM goes through. They get to open the map, and you'll see all the things around it, and they get to pick out the path they'll choose. After they've made the path, you're going to make your marching roll. So the guide, who makes that travel roll, they're going to determine kind of how many events and how long it takes to an event you get. So when you make that marching roll, they're going to roll kind of their travel, and depending on if they have a success, it's going to take 3 hexes for an event to occur, and then +1 for each success icon, Gandalf icon that comes up. So it allows you to delay it, so you don't have as many events that may pop up and kind of throw you off the trail. Now, a failure, this kind of depends on season too. So if you're traveling during the summer months, your next events can be 2 hexes away. If you're traveling during the, spring and summer, I should say. And if you're traveling during the fall and winter months, your next event is 1 hex away. So depending on how far you're traveling for your adventure, this could definitely be kind of an area where we can get some multiple events stacking up. Because one of the big things afterwards is after you experience that event, if you still have distance to reach your journey, you roll another marching order or another travel roll, and you may get another event before you reach the hex that has your prize or your destination. So definitely kind of a cool way to do it. But now that we've touched on kind of how the phase goes, and after that you go to ending your journey. Where you kind of go over fatigue and how much fatigue you've gained from the different events and kind of determine all of that. But we need to go over the events. So with the events, once you trigger an event and you're inside of it, you're going to roll a d6 as the story master or the lore master, and that's going to determine who goes up. So basically, with those, you're going to see if it is the lore master, or not the lore master, the hunter, the scout, whoever lands to on that d6, and they've got the numbers broken down in a table within the book. They're going to be the ones that gets to actually determine how this event goes. So we roll that d6, you find out who's going, and then after you find out who's going, you're going to roll a d12 on the event table, and that's going to determine the event. And what I'll do too is I'll pop over so you can see, I'll take a look at that too, because that's kind of a cool thing with that, and I liked how they set this up. So let's bring that in and kind of show how that goes. So I'm going to bring in the event thing. So once you have the events up there, you're able to kind of begin narrating it. So once you have the events, as we mentioned before too, the group has assigned roles within their within their capabilities. So you have the scout that's going to do the hunter that was going to do hunting, the scout that's going to do or I forgot what the scout does. The lookout that does awareness, and the scout that does explore. So basically, whoever's number comes up, they're going to use that skill to be able to make the check. So let's say we get the hunter. They're going to roll for that, and if they have a success on that, they're able to basically kind of make sure that the event goes well. Now, if they have a failure, they're going to get some consequences of the skill roll, which you see if you get the Eye of Sauron, you get terrible misfortune. If the roll fails, the target's wounded. And you see each of these has a different kind of failure state associated with it. So just kind of go through there. The nice thing with this is it leaves it open to the lore master to be able to kind of go through and kind of narrate what these events are, because they're all pretty vague. So terrible misfortune, despair, ill choices, like they're descriptive, but not exactly kind of keying you in on what's going on. They do give you some examples on the next page on kind of what these can be, but it's up to the lore master to kind of go through and weave into their tale kind of what types of perils their people may be facing, and kind of make sure that it's coming up well and kind of narratively satisfying. So that's kind of a quick look at the journey phase. It's really cool. What I'm looking forward to kind of playing around with this during the actual play tonight, and kind of seeing how all of that goes. I'll be a solo hero, so I'll be doing all the different roles for it. So let's see how Syrian does tonight with it. But the last phase we're going to touch on before we wrap up is the council phase. So this is kind of the RP phase of the adventure. So this is basically, I think, the Council of Elrond. You're going in there, and basically you're going in with a mission. So basically there's 3 phases with it. So the first is you're going to set resistances. So to start the council phase, the party needs to have an objective, and they need to let their story master or lore master know what that objective is and kind of what they're hoping to get out of it. And once the lore master knows this, they're going to set the resistance. So basically this is going to be 3 for a reasonable request, 6 a bold request, 9 an outrageous request. And think reasonable is something that really doesn't hurt or doesn't cost the quest giver or whoever they're speaking with much to give them. Bold is something that's it may not be too hard for, but it's definitely something we wouldn't do just right offhand. And then outrageous is something that's just ridiculous to them, and it's going to take a lot of convincing for them to get into it. So once you've set the resistance, you're going to go into the introduction phase. And basically with the introduction phase, you're going to have one of the party kind of pick somebody, they're their spokesman, and that spokesman's going to kind of RP it out, and then roll one of their skills. It's going to be all, courtesy, or riddle, and that's going to kind of set how this whole phase goes. Because basically if they succeed on this roll, you're going to get the set number of resistances that they have. So remember we touched on before, if it's a reasonable quest, they'd have 3. So if you get a success on this, you're going to have those 3 attempts to be able to win them over, plus any Gandalf die that you get. So that's if you get a success. If you get a failure, you still get the 3 resistances, but the biggest difference is you don't get any additional bonuses, and you also have the potential if you fail this council phase for it to be a big disaster with something terrible happening. So after you've done that, if you enter the introduction phase, that player kind of goes through and makes their argument, and there's definitely rules for the store master or lore master to be able to go through and tweak this. you're going to go into the next phase with interaction. And basic interaction is a little bit of like a skill adventure. Everybody's going to get a chance to go in and kind of plead their case on this side, or kind of try to convince them, whether it be through song, awe-inspiring events, a courtesy, and just kind of utilizing those skills along with your RP to try to bring this person on your side. Now, there's 3 different positions a person can have against you too that affect these roles. So if you get somebody that's just open, they're just kind of open to hearing you out. They're not friendly or not hateful against you. They're just kind of there, here to listen. Basically, you get a flat roll. If you get somebody that's friendly, you get to gain 1 die on your skill checks. If you get somebody that's hostile or reluctant, you lose 1 die on your skill checks. So, kind of a cool way to do that, and how the lore master, and I kind of imagine sometimes it may change person to person or throughout the event as they try to make successful or unsuccessful arguments against you, or maybe even kind of varies on your request. Just kind of some tools the lore master can pull and kind of make it easier, harder, or more engaging for their players. And basically, it ends if you, because with this, so like if you let's say that same person, we had a 3 with a reasonable request, so you get 3 attempts to beat kind of this process, and it's the same rule with rolling a skill. So you're going to be trying to beat your target number associated with the skill, and the party has 3 attempts to do so. So if you beat that and kind of get the success number required, you'll be able to go through and get a success. Now, if you fail, and you fail without failing the introduction roll, you can just have a failure and not get what you want, but don't really lose anything. Or you can fail with a consequence, so that you can make a kind of a pact with the lore master and kind of discussion with them on failing, but something's going to happen. So you may draw somebody's attention, draw somebody's ire, make an enemy, or lose, have to trade an item that the party may not have wanted to give up. Just some consequences that comes with succeeding at a cost with this. Now, on the other hand, if you fail the introduction phase and then fail the council phase, you get a disaster. So this is just whatever happens, like it not only doesn't go your way, something terrible happens with you. You make an enemy of the people you're having the council phase with, or the enemies learn your location. Something just bad happens that the lore master is able to determine and just really kind of dial up those consequences for the failure. But that's kind of a quick look at the phases on this side. So we've kind of went through the adventuring phase, looking at the combat, how journeys work, how the social encounters work, and we got to kind of just get a quick look too, kind of a peek under the hood at some of the mechanics and gears within the One Ring RPG system. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, learned a little bit of something about the One Ring, and maybe inspired you to come bring your own One Ring adventure up. But if you're watching this live, make sure to come join me today at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on my channel, T&J Gaming, linked down in the description. We're going to be running this Strider mode, so just me, myself, and I there. So come hang out and have the potential to win a copy of the PDF of the One Ring system. So join us, and then don't forget to like and subscribe if you're new to the channel, and also drop in the comments, like if there's a feature with the One Ring system that you really liked, drop it out, or even something I didn't call out, drop it in the comments. Always love to hear from you guys too. But thank you all for joining us. Come hang out with me tonight, and even if you do miss it, we'll be hosting the recording of the actual play on YouTube, I think next Tuesday. So hang out, keep your eye out if you miss it, but come join us if you can. And thank you guys for attending, and until next time.